hungry as hell to get started and have been waiting on this night for a while now to have you guys back. This group, we are better as a team.
What you do, your take, your reputation, the way you carry yourself on a daily basis will be evident, because there will be a day that will bring it to light. When the bright lights are on, when the heat is on, when the pressure is there, when the moment is there, it will be revealed with fire. And the fire will prove the quality of each man's work. No one can save us once they didn't play.
What's going on, college football fans, and welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co-host, Marcus, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mason. Sorry we are late tonight, guys. We had some technical difficulties and literally had to go drive a few zip codes away so that I could figure out a way to get this show done. But, hell gonna freeze over before you're going to keep me from talking some college football with all my peeps here on the First and Long College Football Show. Mason, how are you today, buddy? You doing all right? You ready to break down some games? We have what seems to be kind of a lean slate this week, but there are a couple of games that are really, really, really interesting matchups that we're going to talk about tonight. How are you, man?
Man, good. Good to have you here in full digital form. You mentioned the technical difficulties we were having. We try to do this show at 7:30 Tuesday nights. Here we are at a little after 8:30. Look, we improvise and we overcome. We persevere, and we're here. So we're gonna do a little bit of a condensed version of what we had planned. We'll save some of the extra stuff that we had for maybe next week, maybe another week when there's not as many games to talk about. But we do have a few games to talk about tonight, and a couple of ones that I'm super excited about, and ready to break those down with you, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk, obviously, the game of the week, LSU at South Carolina. We're going to talk about, we're going to kind of do like some condensed kind of mini previews on three different games. We've got Bama at Wisconsin, we got Arizona at Kansas State, and then Notre Dame at Purdue. So we're going to talk those three games, and anybody that's watching, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about all four of these games that we're going to talk about today. Put it in the comment section. Let us know. We love to chit-chat with you guys in the comment section. I do my best to keep up with that. Sometimes you guys overwhelm me. This week, it's been South Carolina fans that have been absolutely overwhelming the comment section. Welcome in any of you Gamecock fans. We're going to talk the LSU at South Carolina game right off the bat here because it's one that really has caught my attention now. Not a game that I was expecting to really be talking about a whole lot here going into week 3. And all of a sudden, this game's got me all kind of wrapped up. So really excited to talk about that one and eventually see that one later this week. We were going to talk college football's best freshman. And guys, I guess we'll probably save that for another day. We'll just kind of see how it goes. But I'd like to hear from you guys. What, in your opinion, who is the best freshman in college football so far? Or maybe your top 3. Throw that in the comment section. I'd like to hear from you because that is something, that's a topic we're going to cover. Maybe not today, just because of the time parameters, but a topic that we've been talking about off air, and I think it'd be a really good conversation to have here on the channel. And then we're gonna bring a new segment to you guys at some point, and it's called "Are They Even Good?" And that's gonna be fun. That should tick everybody right on off at us, or at least some people anyway. But so early in the season, you have to ask yourself sometimes: are some of the teams that we think are really good, are they even really good? And there's a few teams that we could really ask ourselves that question. So let us know in the comment section as well on that. Is there a team that you feel like everybody values very highly and you feel like they're probably not even really that good? Let me know in the comment section. I'd like to hear from you guys on that. Thank you again, guys, for joining us. We certainly do appreciate it, whether you're watching us live or on the replay. Sunday evenings, Tuesday evenings, Saturday late after all the games are over, that's when we'll be live. Please come and join us. Hit the subscribe button. Come hang out with us. All three of those shows are a lot of fun, and we want you to be a part of them. Most of the time, we put a link in the description of the video so that you can come and join the show live. We'd love to hear from you. Some of you have done that. LSU at South Carolina. Let's jump into it. Enough hubbub. Let's talk college football. This game's going to kick off at noon at Bryce Williams Stadium. LSU -7, over under set at 50.5. You've got two really conflicting styles of teams going on here, Mason. You've got the defense of South Carolina, and you've got the offense of LSU. And specifically, the matchup that everybody in the nation has been talking about has been this South Carolina defensive front and how they will play this week versus what a lot of people have talked about and think about the LSU offensive line as one of the best in the country. So that's one of the very first matchups that I want to talk about today. And I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this. But we did not do a deep dive in the preseason. We did about 35 deep dives on different teams throughout the country, teams that we felt like had the best opportunity to affect the college football playoff. We said it over and over on all 35 of those videos. South Carolina was not one of those teams. So going into this week, we were a little more, I guess, a little less aware of what South Carolina had going on, say, than LSU. So we had to kind of go and do our research this week, dig into South Carolina a little bit. And here are some of the notes that we had kind of come up with. But Dylan Stewart was somebody that Mason had contacted me about last week and was like, man, look at this guy. Look, what's going on here? Who is this guy? And he's going to definitely take the nation by storm because this is a super, super talented fella. Freaky athlete. Only played a couple of games of college football, guys. But in this game, I would say that the strength right now of this LSU offense is their offensive line, and specifically the two tackles, right? Will Campbell, Emory Jones, guys that a lot of people are figuring to be first-round NFL draft picks. So with that being said, what do you think about this matchup? And, I didn't even mention the interior of the defensive line there. We can kind of get to that in a second, or you can hit it, Mason. But there's a couple of guys listed here, but the list is long. There is a lot of depth in this defensive line room. I was very, very surprised to see it whenever I went and looked at the roster. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but South Carolina hasn't exactly recruited in the top 10 every year or anything. So you just don't expect it. But the way they hit the portal, it seems like they hit it just right to add depth and a bunch of guys coming of age right at the right time. This seems like the perfect storm. And then the injection of the true freshman talent, Dylan Stewart, of course, is the cherry on top of this little banana split they got going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dylan Stewart is a freshman phenom, former 5-star guy. The recruiting industry got it right when it came to Dylan Stewart. Definitely a first-round pick. Might, by the time, which I assume he's going to go pro in 3 years at this rate, he might be the number 1 overall pick. And that would not shock me one bit. And that in a tough class, we talked about it earlier. We're going to get to a segment where we cover the top freshmen in this year so far. We were hoping to do that tonight. Not going to be able to do that, but Dylan Stewart is one of one. I mean, he's a phenomenal player on the defensive side of the football at such a premier position. I mean, as an edge rusher, to see this guy at 6'6", 245 pounds, the way he bends, I mean, he looks like he's a 6 foot, 200-pound lineman out there flying around the football, just a high motor guy, and is going to take the majority of the attention away from this South Carolina defensive front. However, he's probably not even the best guy on this defensive line right now. as a true freshman. He will be, but as of right now, I got to look at the other end position and take a look at Kyle Kennard. I will learn how to say his name. I don't know if it's Kennard or Kennard, but you guys let me know in the comment section. Similar,
they will.
They will. We'll get it right eventually. Similar size, 6'5", 254. He's already notched 5 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Guys, what these two defensive ends or edge rushers, whatever you want to call them, are doing on the edge of this defensive line is nothing short of spectacular. I mean, both of them. Kyle, I'll just call him Kyle since I can't pronounce his last name right. Kyle is he's the leader of the unit, I would say. More experience. And what I found interesting, doing some research on these teams, there are only 5 total players in college football right now that have 2 forced fumbles this season. 2 of them play for South Carolina. That's pretty disruptive. That's called wreaking havoc. For edge players to be forcing fumbles, they're getting to the quarterback, and that's what's so impressive about this front. But then you move into the interior, right? So everybody's going to talk about these edge players. Go into the inside of this line, and you've got number 99, big number 99, 6'4", 315 pounds, got 9 tackles already. You're not supposed to do that on the interior because if you're a really good interior player, teams aren't running up the middle against you. Some teams are stubborn enough to do it. And but counter or on the opposite side of him, you got number 91 coming in, a big twitchy defensive tackle as well. He's got 5 tackles and a sack. Just really impressed with this defensive line. And I think that this is the matchup of the weekend of any units, of any games. This is the matchup of the weekend because opposite of South Carolina is, in my opinion, at least a top 3 offensive line in the SEC. Emory Jones, Will Campbell, their first-round draft picks. Just write them in. Barring each of them giving up 2 sacks in this game or something like that, I mean, which could happen with the South Carolina defensive front that we just talked about. But barring something crazy happening, these 2 tackles are going to be first-round talents. Miles Frazier might be a first-round talent, right? He's trying to play himself into that first round, but definitely a day 2 guy at the very worst. And they're getting good play out of the center and out of the left guard as well. Just really impressed with what LSU has put together on the offensive line. Who's going to win this battle, though, right? That's the big question. To me, I really like South Carolina's defensive front. I think that they can. I feel like if you have a strong defensive line, you can beat offensive linemen one-on-one, right? And it's not the fact that it's not the case that South Carolina's defensive line has a couple of good guys, like really good guys. They've got 4 really good guys and really some depth behind them that you can put in and not feel like there's a ton of drop-off. And that's going to be the issue for this LSU offensive line. And, every other team that they face this year, they're going to have dudes on the defensive line that they're lining up against, but not like South Carolina's about to bring. None are going to be as hot as South Carolina heading into this game. I like South Carolina in this matchup. What do you think, Mark?
Well, just to kind of put a cherry on top of what you just said, South Carolina's defensive line group has got to be the most underrated position group in all of college football. It absolutely has to be. Because I went back and looked at a bunch of the preseason, and nobody would have known that Dylan Stewart was going to pop like he did, right? I mean, you can't count on true freshmen to do that. But nobody had these guys really in the top 5 of any kind of defensive line ranking, at least in the places that I looked. So, it really caught everybody by storm. But, yeah, I mean, they've got multiple – you've got – guys that you thought were going to be starters on this defensive line now hitting the second and the third string and rotating in. So, and I mean, TJ Sanders is a guy that's not even listed here. 43 tackles, 4.5 sacks last year from the defensive tackle position. That was last year. Alex Huntley, 33 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks last year from the defensive tackle position. Yumi Ozulu, a guy that a lot of people at the defensive end position thought was going to be playing probably a whole lot more important role, but now he's more in a depth position. Gilbert Edmond, 23 tackles, a sack. I mean, these are all guys that could have a pretty good chance of starting other places. And then you bring in, like we have listed here, DeAndre Jules comes over from Pitt, and you just absolutely hit on him in the portal. Kyle Kennard, you hit on him from Georgia Tech. He had 54 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks last year. Kyle Kennard did for Georgia Tech, a defense that was, I mean, he didn't have any help. Let's just say that. He didn't have any help. But let's talk a little bit more about this LSU offensive line for a second. A couple of notes that I had noted here. No sacks allowed yet in 2024 by the LSU offensive line. Nobody has gotten Garrett Nussmeier on the ground yet. Now, I know what everybody's going to say to that. You know, they haven't played a South Carolina level defensive line, and that is 100% true. They've played USC and something called Nichols. They played some pocket change. And so, yeah, I get what you're saying. But on the other hand of that, this team is really good at pass pro. This offensive line is really good at pass pro. 113th in the nation in rush yards per game is this LSU offense. 88.5 yards per game. And everybody at this point probably knows, and if you don't, John Emery, longtime in LSU running back at this point, last year had blew out a knee, sat out, came back. I believe it was his right one last year. He comes back, plays a game or two, has a pretty good game or two, and blows his left knee out. And this was already a running back room that had kind of lost a couple of guys from last year. And so there's a lot of questions, not to mention Jaden Daniels was a large chunk of their rushing production last year. Nussmeier, while he is mobile in the pocket, he can move around when he feels he's really good at feeling the pressure around him and scooting around. But he's not going to go take off and get you, he's not going to rush for 75 yards in a game. It's not going to happen. That's not the kind of guy this guy is. And so that kind of leads me to one of my questions, Mason, for this LSU offensive line. And it's not a popular take. So I totally 100% understand that. And if LSU fans see this, I actually have commented with some LSU fans that agree with me on this. I don't think this offensive line is as nearly as good as it's advertised. I know that Emory Jones is really good, and I know Will Campbell's really good. But I just wonder, because, look, when you play with a generational guy or a Heisman candidate, you're going to look a whole lot better. There's no secret to that. I mean, national championship teams typically have more NFL, draft picks than, your 8-4 team. It's because they're around other really good players. They all make each other look really good. Jaden Daniels was able to escape the pocket and get away from defenders pretty much at will. He was a thin-built fella, but boy, he was quick and he was fast too. So I'm still trying to figure out how this offensive line has transitioned from that to a purely pocket passer and Garrett Nussmeier, which I have a ton of respect for, by the way, guys. If you don't remember, this is the same quarterback that threw all over Georgia in the second half of an SEC championship game. And I believe that team went on to win a national championship. So, he's got skills. He can absolutely spin it. But can this LSU offensive line protect him from these beasts that South Carolina, you called them Scarolina, Mason, and a lot of people like that. I don't know if you saw that, but lots of people liked you calling them Scarolina, and it kind of did stick with me as well. Maybe we can do a little spooky Scarolina episode there in Halloween. That's what it made me think of.
When we get to Cocktober, Scarolina is your team. I mean,
oh yeah. That's got a nice little ring to it there. I like that. But my point remains with this offensive line for LSU. Can they get a push and run the football? Because if they can't, it's probably going to be a little bit of a long day, my friend. It's supposed to be raining, by the way. I don't know if everybody's checked the weather or not, but there's like 70 to 80% chance of rain for this game in South Carolina. And I'm not saying that this overwhelmingly helps South Carolina. It's going to rain for both teams here. South Carolina hasn't been amazing at running the football or anything this year, so I don't think they have like a unbelievably clear advantage on offense versus LSU, who obviously likes to throw it a lot more, and their running back room being a little bit thin. But that's also kind of a storyline here for this game. You got anything else on that before we move to the next kind of little matchup we have here?
No, I think we're good. We can move on. I think we're on the same page with that. I do like it's kind of puzzling how bad LSU's been at running the football. Even though I know they're down to 2 running backs, like I get it, but they're not 2 like terrible running backs. So the fact that the offensive line's not getting a push up front, that really speaks to the interior of the offensive line, which we know is a little bit behind the 2 tackles that we mentioned are going in the first round. But overall, I mean, if they're not able to run the football in this game and become one-dimensional, I have questions about Nussmeier's protection in this game against that defensive line.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our next topic, Mason, which is this LSU passing game versus the South Carolina secondary. And the reason it's a perfect segue is, Mason, because if LSU is one-dimensional and South Carolina knows that they're going to throw it, or I guess better yet, knows that LSU can't run it on this front, it's going to be big, big problems, because this is a good secondary for South Carolina. Also very, very underrated. Now, are they crazy deep? I don't know. I don't know about that part. But is the starting lineup looks to be healthy, and they look really good. So I like this group. Now, Chris Hilton, who's pictured for LSU here, is still day-to-day. Brian Kelly has said that he's told us a couple of weeks ago that it was a bone bruise. It's in his foot, and it was day-to-day. He thought maybe he'd come back last weekend. He didn't come back last weekend. He's still not practicing at full speed. And Brian Kelly also said that he feels as though the injury may be one. It's going to come down to Chris Hilton and how much pain he can play with, basically, which doesn't sound very good. That doesn't sound good to me. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't pass catchers out here for LSU still. Kyron Lacey is going to be a big issue. And, I've seen these types of receivers come through the SEC time and time again, Mason, over the last few years. Alabama's had some. LSU's had quite a few now. When a guy like Kyron Lacey is on his game, he can just single-handedly bust the game wide open. T-Mac at Arizona is kind of the same way, a guy that we're going to talk about later in the show, wide receiver at Arizona. When he's on his game like he was in week 1, he'll just take the game right on over. And that's the type of guy that Kyron Lacey is. And you've got to watch out for it, because once he's on a roll, it's really hard to get him slowed down. But I like this secondary for South Carolina. Nick Emanwari, he makes his way back, 71 tackles last year, 2 interceptions, 8 pass deflections. He's at one of the safety spots. And then DQ Smith, 73 tackles, had a couple of tackles for loss and 2 pass deflections last year. He is back as well. And then I really like O'Donnell Fortune, 39 tackles, 6 pass deflections, and a couple of picks last year himself. The other cornerback spot, you got a couple of guys still kind of battling it out, but both of them have looked pretty good for the most part so far. And then I think one of the most impressive guys in the secondary, Jalen Kilgore, playing that nickelback position, 76 tackles, 6 pass deflections, forced fumble, an interception last year. And Mason, he's already surpassed some of those numbers. He's already got 2 pass deflections and 2 interceptions in 2024. Mm-hmm. So this guy has started off really, really, really hot for South Carolina, where, like I said, I don't know how deep this team is. If you have one of those safeties go down, I'm sure there's somebody there to step up. I'm not sure they're going to be quite at the level of, Emanwari or DQ Smith, obviously, right? But I really, really like the starting group, and they're healthy right now. If South Carolina can figure out a way, as you said, to make LSU one-dimensional and know that they have to throw it. And you know what that means, guys? That means being successful on defense on first and second down. You've got to get LSU in third and long, third and obvious. And if South Carolina can do that, they may come away with an interception or two, which is something that they really need to do because this offense is something we haven't really talked about yet. It's not great. What do you think about this matchup here?
Well, I feel like the jury is still out on the South Carolina secondary. And the reason is because I don't think that they've been tested. We saw in the game against Kentucky does not have a pulse on offense when it comes to passing the football, especially. Maybe just in general, maybe period. Because they looked absolutely flabbergasted when with this defensive front for South Carolina, and I think that's where South Carolina wins in the passing game is with their blitz packages and things like that. They're going to have to install some blitz packages. Maybe you see Kilgore coming off the edge playing that nickel position and doing some nickel back blitzing and things like that because if LSU's pass pro kind of holds up on that defensive line and they're not getting pressure on Nussmeier, I think that Nussmeier will take advantage of that and kind of pick them apart. Now, it's fair to point out if Chris Hilton doesn't go, I feel like LSU kind of doesn't have the dudes behind Lacey. I mean, there's really nobody that scares you. CJ Daniels, I think we're still kind of waiting on him to come on. He's a grad transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Thomas, Aaron Anderson. I do really like Mason Taylor, but is Kilgore going to match up on Mason Taylor throughout the game? That's an interesting matchup that we'll have to watch as well. But to me, if you're giving Nussmeier time, I think that he can pick apart this defensive backfield, which I do really like. I really like this backfield for South Carolina. But I just worry that a lot of their success has been dependent upon the defensive line for South Carolina and isn't really a byproduct of them being elite. I think that, and this is fair for any team that you want to talk about. If the defensive line isn't getting pressure up front, then it's going to expose a secondary. I'm afraid that might happen in this game, but I do like the projection of this defensive backfield. I just feel like for me, they're a little bit unproven. I'm not ready to say that they're elite yet. As an entire unit because they haven't been tested with the pass rush that the South Carolina defensive front has been able to get so far. But with LSU, I think that they're thin in the passing game. It's Kyron Lacey, and then maybe a decoy of Chris Hilton. I know we're not getting
Taylor.
Yeah, I mean Mason Taylor, but I know we're not getting Chris Hilton at 100%. If we were, he would have played last week. So that kind of hampers my feeling about this, but yeah, ultimately I don't mean to ride the fence here, but I feel like there's no real lean on either side of the football when you look at these two position groups. The South Carolina secondary, like I said, is unproven, and then LSU is just depleted. I feel like in comparison to where they've been in years past. No real dominant playmakers outside of Lacey and Taylor and Chris Hilton, who even at 100% hasn't played like a dominant wide receiver. So I think it's fair to question whether or not he's even going to be one of the elite receivers in the SEC.
Yeah. An interesting part of this is that LSU running back shortage that they've got going on. There's a shortage of bodies in that running back room. And I think whenever you play South Carolina, you're going to have a veteran running back that is ready to pick up the blitz in the backfield. I think that's going to be something that's really important whenever you play South Carolina. And LSU, I don't think they have that experience. I'm interested to see, how they kind of manage that because I don't obviously LSU. This is the best offensive line that South Carolina has faced, and I hate to keep going back to the last topic we just talked about, but everything just ties into the trenches. But this is the best offensive line that South Carolina has faced, hands down. And while that is true, and LSU has not given up a sack this year, I think that ends this weekend. There's no way that South Carolina gets skunked in the sack numbers this weekend. Now, is it 2 or 4? That's the question for me. Is it 2 or is it 4?
I think the number's 2.5. If you're giving me an over and under, and if South Carolina wants to win this game, it's got to be over. I don't feel. I feel like if they win this game, they're at 4. You know what I mean? If they get held to 1 or 2, I think that they lost this football game. That's kind of like a what some would call a padlock stat in our industry.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this all works out. And another thing before we get on to this next topic, with the shortage of wide receivers as well, Chris Hilton out, you kind of lack some experience, obviously. You lost 2 guys to the NFL last year, so you're not returning a bunch of experience in this room. You're not going to see any, 4 wide receiver sets or anything from LSU. I don't think you're going to see the tight end come off the field a whole lot. Mason Taylor's going to play a lot of snaps this game. I think that if you're doing some kind of fantasy thing, Mason Taylor, he's going to be one of the go-to guys in this game. He has to be, because I don't think Chris Hilton's going to play, man. A bone bruise in his foot. I don't know.
And then you want to have him out there in potentially a wet game. I'm with you.
I just don't see that. I don't think it's smart. I don't think it's putting your best players on the field. But at the same time, LSU, I feel like it's just another way that LSU is limited offensively in this game. Now they're limited formationally. They're limited what am I trying to say? They're limited on, running the football. They obviously can't do that. So there's just so much, I feel like, working against this team here in this game. Not to mention it's on the road. This is something we hadn't talked about yet. Let's talk about the South Carolina offense, okay? And then we're going to talk about the LSU defense a little bit. Not one of the better offensive units in the country, and not one of the better defensive units in the country. So it's kind of crazy. This game is strength on strength, kind of weakness on weakness, if you will. I'd hate to say weakness. Let's just say work in progress, right? This South Carolina offense is a work in progress right now. Where is Nick Harbor? If somebody hadn't put him on the back of a milk carton, now look, I know he's played. I kid. He's got 34 snaps, which is good for the 5th most snaps for a wide receiver on this team. But he hasn't even got the ball in his hand yet, Mason. I mean, he's what's going on? You got to get playmakers the ball. Maybe they've been holding out for this one, but Nick Harbor is kind of just that snake line in the grass, and as soon as somebody can get that guy riled up and get him going, I feel like it's going to be a really, really big deal for the South Carolina offense. Lenora Sellers still trying to cut his teeth. This hasn't been a clinic in the passing game, nor the running game. Rocket Sanders has had some moments. He's a nice addition to this offense, and an offensive line that returns 4 out of 5 starters. Now, when you return 4 out of 5 starters from a unit that wasn't that great last year, you kind of have some questions. But nevertheless, they have experience. But we got to figure out some kind of identity for this offense, because the defense has just set it up for this offense over and over and over again on a tee these first couple of games. And at some point, this offense is going to have to, wake up from the offseason and get it going. Lenora Sellers, I felt like, looked a little better in week 2 than he did week 1. So I'm going to take that as, things are moving in the right direction, but we're just going to have to kind of wait and see. What do you think about the South Carolina offense?
Well, I'm someone who's kind of holding on to hope for Lenora Sellers. You'll hear some people talk about how this isn't the guy, he's not a quarterback, and blah blah blah. I like his skill pieces. I think
Okay,
he's a
you're
fun.
quoting me from the overreaction show, and that's not fair because I would just drank 10 beers, and that was, it's the overreaction show, Mason. You can't hold it
Yeah.
against me. What happens on Saturday night stays on Saturday night.
Well, I was going to keep you incognito and just roll with some guys, some guys that come on this show. No, so, but I'm holding on hope that he is going to get better. He's a work in progress. Nobody really expected him to come out and just light the world on fire. And in this year, he's always been a project, right? He wasn't some polished quarterback coming into South Carolina. So you had to expect that there would be some drop off, with Spencer Rattler going to the NFL, and there has been, and that's okay. As long as he continues to progress throughout the year, I'd like to see him in this game just kind of complete 60% of his passes. I think that's kind of the goal here in this game. You got to get Rocket Sanders involved. He doesn't seem like much of a rocket right now when you really watch him run. Doesn't have a ton of burst. I'm curious what the run game looks like, especially if it's going to be raining in this game, which my weather report's saying that it's going to be just cloudy right now. So we'll see. Keep an eye on the weather, especially if you're betting on this game. This is one that you definitely want to keep an eye on. But can you get Rocket Sanders involved? That's going to be the catalyst for this football team in this game. Get him involved. Get him at least 80 yards on the ground. That's kind of the point here, where you got to be over 80 yards in this game, in my opinion, because I don't think that Lenore Sellers is going to come out here and throw for 300 yards against LSU. I just don't see it.
This offense hasn't even gotten 300 yards total in either one of the first two games they've played. They're averaging about 265 yards a game right now.
If you didn't do it against Old Dominion, I don't know that you're going to do it against LSU, and what seems to be a pretty improved defense for LSU with Blake Baker coming over. I've got questions about that. Against Kentucky, though, if you watch that game, Kentucky was getting some pressure. I mean, this was a battle of defensive lines for most of that game, and Lenore Sellers, credit him, he came over the top and made some good plays. We saw Robbie Ashford come in. He made some good plays, really made some good plays with his legs, ran hard. I'm kind of wondering if you don't see a little bit of Robbie Ashford in this game just because of how well he played, especially if Sellers struggles once again and the game's close enough where putting in an experienced quarterback like Robbie Ashford might give South Carolina a little bit of an edge. But when I look at the receivers, I'm with you. Where the heck is Nick Harbor? Get this guy a freaking end around. Get him a jet sweep or something. If he's not getting open, if it's his route running deficiencies, let's just hand the ball off to him. Guy's got Olympic track speed. Like I don't understand that aspect of or I guess I don't understand the offensive scheme and why he's not being utilized at all. I mean, I understand he's a raw talent, but even raw talents can find the football every once in a while, and he hasn't yet, which is really head scratching. It's really puzzling. Now, in his defense, the South Carolina offense hasn't been on the field a ton either. They haven't extended drives very well, and so they really haven't had a lot of offensive plays in general. So maybe if they can get extra drives and whatnot, then maybe they get him a little bit more involved. But really the bright spot in this offense has been the true freshman, Mazio Bennett, number 3, 5 receptions, 81 yards, averaging 16.2, and he's got 1 touchdown. Outside of that, kind of just a bunch of guys, for the most part. Jared Brown's done some nice things, but statistically, this unit's just got to play better. I mean, if they're going to win this ball game, you don't have to go out and outplay LSU's receivers and pass game. Like that's not the objective, because you trust your defense to be able to get those stops and give you the ball back, but extend drives, settle for 3 when you have to, but extend drives, get in the red zone on more drives than you don't. And South Carolina so far hasn't been able to do that. I've got serious questions about this offense. I think if South Carolina loses this game, it's going to be because of their offense. And I think that this is going to hamper this team as a whole, potentially for the entire season if they don't get better really in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And defenses keep you in games, right? So I suspect that South Carolina is going to be able to hang in some football games. And I think that's what's going to be able to keep them in this game here as well. And let's just kind of talk about, we got to do our due diligence. And you said a few minutes ago, you said the Old Dominion defense isn't as good as the LSU defense. And you are 100% correct. But it was kind of close last year.
Yeah.
If you look
That's
statistically, Old Dominion, while did not play nearly as high a level of competition, obviously. Okay, I can see that notion, but Old Dominion, a lot of teams, about 120 different teams had better defensive statistics than LSU did, and that's why Blake Baker was brought in to LSU from Missouri, and I think it's too much to ask this early in the season for Blake Baker to have this defense all figured out at this point. It's too early. And in my opinion, defense takes a lot longer to build up after, especially when you're building from literally the bottom floor, right, of college football, statistically speaking. I don't think talent-wise, I know not talent-wise. LSU's always got talented guys, but for whatever reason, this team hasn't played defense worth a lick, couldn't stop a nosebleed the last couple of years. And unfortunately for LSU, but fortunately for South Carolina's offense, that has continued for the most part. I have seen instances where I've watched LSU's defense this year and I've thought, hey, Blake Baker actually had some guys in position right there. But when you really look at the roster as a whole, it's pretty much all the same guys, minus a couple of dudes on the defensive line, which is that is the biggest deficiency, guys, for this LSU defense is that defensive line and the secondary. The linebacker room is pretty decent. There's some really, really nice pieces, but decent overall in the linebacker room. Defensive line, thin, not very talented. Just had an injury. I can't remember the guy's name. Just had another injury this week. You're down another guy, right? A guy that was playing. So that defensive line is down real bad. And then the secondary, it's all the same players from last year, pretty much. So I just feel like it's a lot to ask, I guess, of Blake Baker, but I still had to do it. I had to pull up the numbers so far this year, the LSU defense versus the defense of last year in 2023, and I've compiled those stats, put them on your screen there. 4 points per game less so far in 2024, and guys, we have a small sample size, so I'm it's kind of a you could argue it's kind of a butthole move for me to pull up stats from 2 games, but you know what, we this is what we do in college football. We look at everything under a microscope, and LSU's a big boy football program. So I had to check it out. Opponent red zone conversion, you're seeing a little bit of a better trend there, about 4% better there. Rushing yards per game allowed, a pretty considerable difference there, about 50 yards a game rushing. That is noticeable. That is a big difference there because you're talking, 5 first downs worth of run plays there. That's a big difference. 50 yards in a game is different. So the havoc plays is kind of one thing that surprised me, though, Mason. This team is not, and maybe they're not blitzing at all. Maybe this LSU defense is saying, no, we're going to keep our structural integrity, and we're not going to bring the house, and we're going to play real defense, and we're going to just have men where they're supposed to be men. But the havoc plays last year were happening at a much higher rate than what they are right now. So I'm not sure that this is a game where LSU decides all of a sudden that they're going to start sending the house, because they need the help. They need as much help as they can in the back end. But, Does LSU respect South Carolina wide receivers? We'll see. Can Nick Harbor blow past him? If somebody can blow past this defense one good time, it'll set everything else up for South Carolina the rest of this game. But this is not a great LSU defense, is my whole point of this. Last year, we joked about it several times. We said the best medicine for a struggling or bad offense right now is to play LSU's defense. Because every time somebody played LSU's defense last year, they had an absolute ball and field day, which is why they had the number one offense in the country in damn near every category, but lost 5 football games, 4 football games, whatever it was. Not a complimentary football team, very one-sided, and that continues to be the truth. And that is what it is. What are your thoughts on this LSU defense? I think they're in better position, but it's the same dudes. It's going to take some time, I think. I'm not ready to say that this is a good defense while it may be trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And we're asking some of the same questions we asked last year. So far, it does, while it does seem like Harold Perkins is playing better, he doesn't look like what he did his freshman year still. I think that we're still trying to figure out what he is. What position is he going to play? I thought we would have answers at this point in the season. Still feel like we don't, for the most part. One bright light has been Syvion Jones. He's got 7 total tackles, 2 sacks already, a forced fumble, and a pass deflection. Been a little bit disruptive up front at the defensive end position. I think Gio Paez, coming over from Wisconsin, has been pretty good. 6 total tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. But overall, we're asking some of the same questions on the defensive line, or on the defense as a whole. It starts up front on the defensive line. I think you just have a very average defensive line, not even an SEC average, like a college football average SEC or defensive line. And but in the linebacker room, I do still like Harold Perkins as a player. I think he's really good. I don't know that he's necessarily playing at a first-round talent type of level. But I know he's capable of that. I mean, look, this is a guy who can take a ball game over. We've seen it several times, and this could be a game where he just does that. But also, Whit Weeks, the true sophomore, has been playing really well. 11 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for a loss. We heard in the offseason that he had been coming on, and I think he has so far. What does he do to affect the run game for South Carolina? That's kind of a big question to me. He could be sort of one of those playmakers in the middle of this defense as well. And then in the secondary, you got true sophomore Ashton Samps, who's got 8 tackles, already got 3 pass deflections, which is really good this early in the season after just 2 games. Seems like he's playing himself into a lockdown sort of cornerback, and we know what Sage Ryan brings to the table. I think that with his experience, this is his 4th year now playing the cornerback position. With that experience, a lot of teams seem to be going away from him and challenging Ashton Stamps. Well, Ashton Stamps is answering the challenge. So you got 2 pretty good pieces in the cornerback positions. Major Burns playing that star. He's been really good throughout his career. I'm just a little bit curious about the safeties, and in particular, what they've been able to do in the run game. I need to see them coming up and playing the run a little bit better. I think that's been lacking for the LSU defense for years. When you don't have the defensive line up front that LSU historically has had, but here recently, they haven't played all that great. They haven't played the run all that great. But when you don't have that, the other pieces of the defense have to work that much harder to stop the run, specifically that strong safety position. Got to come up and play the run a little bit better. They haven't done so this far in the season, and maybe it is that Blake Baker defense, and maybe they're kind of playing not prevent all the time, but kind of just playing back and making sure they don't get beat over the middle, keeping everything in front. But that's allowing some running plays to be made on this LSU defense, and I got to see a little bit more of a balanced defense from this unit to think that they are going to be disruptive and be a strong suit for this team. As of right now, it's definitely the weakest part of the team still, but They are a touch better from where they were last year. Can they build on that against a South Carolina offense that so far has been pretty anemic? That's kind of the big question to me. A lot of interesting unit matchups in this game. A lot of good on good, bad on bad type of play. We're going to learn a lot from both of these teams in this game this weekend. I absolutely cannot wait for it. College game day is going to be there. First time in Columbia since like 2018 or something. I really wish it was a night game. I hate that this is a noon kickoff. I think had this been scheduled, last Saturday or Sunday, maybe it would have been a later kickoff. But nonetheless, really excited for it. We got LSU at -7. For my money right now, I think LSU is going to cover that 7 points. You can get it at 6.5 in some places. I would definitely take the 6.5 there, but with the way that this offense is playing for LSU, I just feel like they're going to be able to get the protection up front. Not for the entirety of the game, but enough protection up front to give Garrett Nussmeier the time to make those plays down the field. I think that the LSU run game takes a step forward in this one. I think you could see some South Carolina defensive linemen over pursuing a little bit, getting a little bit too hungry, trying to go for the sack, and maybe one of these running backs kind of gets loose a couple of times. It'll be a close game for 4 quarters, but I think that LSU kind of wins it and seals it late in the 4th quarter and wins by a touchdown.
Wow. Gotcha. I'm going to have to fight you on that one. I'm taking South Carolina. Give me the +7. I'm not so sure that this is going to be one that's going to be on the best bet show for me, just because of the fact that there's a lot of questions got to be answered for both of these teams. But one pick that probably will be on the best bet show, depending on what the number does as the week goes on, is this over-under. And I'm going to hit the under here because I think both of these offenses, I know South Carolina's offense is not very good right now. They're still trying to figure out where they're at. But I think LSU's offense struggles here. And I think they get too one-dimensional in this football game. I don't think they're going to be able to run the football against South Carolina, especially with the woes they've had in the running back room. And I don't think LSU's, personally, offensive line is as good as what everybody thinks it is. And that's just me. I get why people would argue with me on that, but that's just the way I feel. And I gotta see it this weekend, and maybe LSU will make a believer out of me. But I'm gonna have to see it before I'll believe it. Give me South Carolina +7. I like the momentum that this team has. There's been South Carolina fans in the comment section saying, "You jinxed us," blah blah blah. Guys, hey, I know we've all got battered fan syndrome at some point. Okay. But nothing I say here is going to affect the outcome of this football game. South Carolina's got a good defense, and it's about to show up on Saturday, I do believe. Hey, thank y'all all so much for tuning in to the First and Long College Football Show. We had one comment here earlier. Dog Sickum says LSU takes the game. LSU wins this in the air. If LSU's going to win it, they are going to have to win in the air. That's the only option that they've got right now. They don't have any other options. Unless South Carolina just has a meltdown on offense and, turns the ball over a bunch, which is going to be possibly wet. That's possible. But that's why I want to play the under in this game. I feel like the under is just the best play in that game right now.
I agree. I'm not betting either way. I might bet the under. I'm going to give it a couple of days, see how I feel, see how the weather looks. But I definitely am not betting against the spread. Just not going to do it because even I'm leaning LSU, but I'm leaning LSU by like 8 or 9 points. I'm not comfortable enough to bet at 7 or even 6.5. I think that South Carolina is going to be able to. I think that they are going to be able to get to the red zone. I just think that their red zone issues continue. They're going to be settling for field goals, and LSU may not make the red zone every drive, but they've got the explosiveness to kind of take the top off every once in a while, and I think that's the difference in this ball game.
That's South Carolina. You know what? You know what I'm going to do. And guys, tune in to the betting show. We do our betting show on Thursdays. It's about to be moving to Tuesdays next week, though, so keep an eye out for that. It's called Between the Lines. We have a really good time there, and hey, we've got a record over 500 too for the show this year betting. But I think what I'm going to do is take South Carolina on the money line, because the reason I say that, I think either South Carolina wins this football game outright or they don't cover, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or I guess I should rephrase that. Either South Carolina straight up wins this football game or LSU covers. That would be the correct way to say that.
Right. Right.
I don't think South Carolina loses a close game here. I think either LSU comes out and does their thing and they win it in the air, like Dog Sickum said, or I think South Carolina wins this football game. We'll see. That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun. I can't wait. Mason, are you ready to talk Arizona at Kansas State? You ready to do that one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. And guys, we're gonna do this one a lot faster. We've got a little bit different kind of thing we're trying here. When you guys watch this live show, we're recording our clips that we're releasing. And the ones that we release, we kind of throw out into the algorithm and let them find these fan bases. So we're going to keep these down to much shorter time frames. So y'all hang out with us. Hit us up in the comment section, and y'all come on the show if you'd like to do that. I'd like to talk to you guys. Thank you all again so much for tuning in. Let's jump into these three interesting games we've got here. Arizona at Kansas State. Kansas State is a 7.5 point favorite. Over under is set at 58.5. Noah Fafita is a young talent at Arizona, and he comes into his sophomore year after really just kind of putting everybody on notice last year. Had a monster game week 1 against New Mexico, but a lot of that had to do with Teteroa McMillan. And he was the main recipient with 10 catches, 304 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns, and really there was 422 yards thrown for by Fafita, and 304 of them went to T-Mac. In week 1, the defense was put to the test by New Mexico, who scored 24 points in the first half and had a first half lead and gained 211 rushing yards on this Arizona defense. In week 2, the defense came to play, but this time the offense would slump. So while the rushing offense did have another good outing led by the Quali Conley and Kendrick Riscano and Ja'Cory Crosby Merritt, the passing game just really struggled. Noah Fafita, 173 yards passing, 6.7 average, which was almost exactly half of his average yards per completion in week 1, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. And I don't think it was any coincidence that the offense sputtered just as their top playmaker did. T-Mac had 2 receptions and 11 yards this past week after that 300 and something odd yard receiving game in week 1. Now, I've watched several Arizona shows over the last couple of days, Mason. Several different people I've heard, and this is all rumors. There's no news stories about this. It's not confirmed. I'm telling you now. But T-Mac seemed to be grimacing a little bit. And this is a guy who missed a lot of the spring and a lot of the offseason dealing with a foot injury that he got repaired. Him playing in this game is going to obviously have a very large bearing on the outcome of this football game. This offense seems to sputter at times anyway, and they were 0 for 10 on 3rd down against NAU last week. Yeah, that's NAU, Northern Arizona University, okay? The rushing offense will need to get it going. The offensive line will need to be better in pass pro because it seemed like Fafita was kind of getting some pressure on him and having trouble getting through his reads. The offensive line is going to have to be a lot better this week against Kansas State. 4 out of 5 starters return in that position group, and the defense will need to tackle a lot better to be able to beat the Kansas State Wildcats. And to bring us that side of the matchup, Mason, what you got on these Kansas State Wildcats?
Yeah, so for the other Wildcats for Kansas State, it really starts with the phenom quarterback Avery Johnson, right? Hasn't really looked like a phenom so far this season. I think he's still getting his legs up under him. Finished last week against Tulane at 15 of 23, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but if you watch the game, you can tell that he's still kind of struggling to pick up the offense, to extend drives, and really be that dynamic playmaker that Kansas State, kind of brought him in to be. This is a sputtering offense for Kansas State so far. Looking to get things right in this game against Arizona, a pretty weak Arizona defense by all accounts. So maybe this is a get right game for Avery Johnson. But in the running game, they have had a lot of success. Avery Johnson himself, 8 attempts for 40 yards, and that's taken out any sacks that he might have had. But DJ Giddens has 19 attempts for 114 yards. Now, one of those runs was a 51-yarder. So, take that with a grain of salt. Outside of that 51 yards, he probably looks pretty pedestrian for 18. I guess it would be 18 attempts at about 64 yards or so. And then, the other back, Dylan Edwards, who comes over from Colorado, was a really good freshman back last year for Colorado. Only 4 attempts last week for 54 yards. So maybe they get him a little bit more involved in this one. I'm kind of curious to see what the rushing game looks like, but so far that has been the strong suit of the offense. On the defensive side of the football, they look pretty disruptive. They had 5 sacks against Tulane last week, and look, you'll take that every single week. If you can get 5 sacks, that's really good. But ultimately, the team as a whole did give up 27 points. They did not cover the 9.5 point spread, ended up winning 34-27. Biggest question mark is this offense. Can they get rolling in this game against Arizona? I think it's a get right game for Kansas State and for Avery Johnson. I like Kansas State to win and cover the 7.5 points, especially if you're telling me T-Mac's hurt or hobbled in some way. I think that plays into the favor of Kansas State quite a bit. So give me Kansas State, who was my preseason pick to win the Big 12. I think that this is a get right game for them, and they end up getting it done against the bad Wildcats in this one.
I think I'm with you on that one, Mason. I think I'm with you. Give me Kansas State minus 7.5 here. Arizona's been too inconsistent, as I said. Good game on offense, bad game on defense. Good game on defense, bad game on offense. We'll just have to kind of see. It's been really inconsistent, and Kansas State has been the same way this year. Thank you so much for watching the First and Long College Football Show. All right, guys, let's talk Dog Sick'em. So looking at the stats from previous games, would you take the under at 58.5? I think if you're going to play the total in this one, I think you can't. I don't think you can play over here.
So what is interesting? I know there's no Will Howard on this team, but if you look at the past 6 games that Kansas State has played in, the over has hit in 5 of those 6 games.
Wow.
Pretty interesting. That says a lot about the defense and the offense. Now, in 4 of those games, they scored at least 38 points. So, are they going to score 38 against Arizona? Maybe. I could definitely see the over hitting on this one, just given the fact that neither of these two teams are playing very good defense right now, for the most part, and the offenses are just itching to get right and do better.
I just feel like Kansas State is going to really want to run the football here. And I know Kansas State fans are ready for Avery Johnson to unleash the playbook. And I've listened to all the Kansas State shows this week. I hear all you guys. I know what you're talking about. I've been there, done that with a young quarterback where it's just like, man, can we please just let this guy go out there and run the offense? And I don't think that's going to happen. There's a reason they're reining him in right now. And I don't know what that reason is, but I don't think it matters because these running backs for Kansas State are really, really, really good. So they've done that's been the most consistent thing on this offense this year is the running backs getting yards on the ground. Kansas State has done a pretty good job of that. Kansas State has also consistently not played that great a defense through the air specifically. Tulane was throwing the ball all over them. Now, let me tell you guys, Tulane has got a wide receiver that's going to play in the NFL as well, and he was putting on a clinic. So, I think it's one of those things. Sometimes the college football gods can be a little cruel and just kind of throw you some impossible tasks whenever you're playing a team that you think you should just absolutely cream in Tulane, and then all of a sudden there's this NFL player out there that you've got to guard, right? And it's like, well, wait a second, this is supposed to be Tulane, I didn't love Kansas State's demeanor after the game last week either. I felt like the team, maybe it was just a sigh of relief for the team because it seemed like everybody was really quiet at the end of that football game because, let's be honest, Tulane bailed out Kansas State last week. I mean, let's just be honest. That is what it is. Maybe a bad call. Hey, you can say what you want to say. I don't know that it was a bad call. I'm not one of the zebras. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Apparently, by the letter of the law, it was pass interference. I don't know. Kansas State fans, you let me know. But this game is another one. I don't think it's going to be on my best bets for the week because neither one of these teams has shown me any consistency, really. And neither one of them has done anything that I've expected them to do at any time that I've expected them to do it. So this is not a game that I'm betting on, but if I was going to bet on it, I feel like the under is the play because I feel like T-Mac is I feel like there's something going on. He would not have had 2 catches last week whenever they won 22-10. I mean, they were like tied at halftime in this game. They needed him. It's not like they just said, "Nah, rest T-Mac." No, they needed him. They almost lost. Yeah. So I just something's up there. Kansas State's going to want to run the football. Arizona can't tackle. They can't tackle. I don't know what their missed tackle rate is, but it's got to be pretty bad so far this year. Not been great tackling.
And I do have to rescind my last statement. So it's Arizona that 5 out of the last 6 were over, which makes a ton of sense. Their last game against Northern, against Northern Arizona was under, but the over under was set at 64.5. And then of course in against New Mexico, the over under was set at 60, and Arizona was able to put that up on their own. So for Kansas State, it's been a little bit mixed. Really, I mean, 50-50, 5 over, 5 under in the last 10. I'm staying away from this game. I got to stay away from it. I'm staying away from it. As much as I want to just go out here and say that, Kansas State's gonna win and cover and put my money there, it's not gonna make the Thursday show for me.
For what it's worth, my gut told me to take Arizona. Yeah. And the line is moving the way of Kansas State, guys. So I would trust my gut here. If you really want to bet this game, it's the Big 12. Nobody's going to blow anybody out. Like these contenders at the top I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Baylor. Baylor's going to get blown out. But Arizona, Kansas State, Utah, like Oklahoma State, none of these teams are blowing the other team out, guys. It's not happening. I think this is going to be the conference of one-score games.
It's actually going back in Arizona's favor right now. So it's actually
it was at 8.
It's actually come to 7 now since we've been on. So 61% of the bets are coming towards Arizona. 61% are going towards the over as well.
Well, and they're moving the number, so I like that. Whenever that kind of money comes in and then Vegas doesn't move the number, that's when I get really, really concerned. But the number's moving. Maybe you wait then, guys, if you want to take Arizona and the points. But my point is this is an unpredictable game, but my rule for the Big 12 this year is going to be one-score football games. If somebody's favored by more than one score, I'm gonna take the underdog. So I rescind my Kansas State pick, and I'm going to pick Arizona, but I'm not actually going to bet it, so it doesn't matter. Let's go to our next one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Under is the better play there, guys. I'm telling you right now. Under's the better play.
Where are we going to? Notre Dame, Purdue? Because I might need to update that.
I was just going to talk LSU at South Carolina again, but let's don't do that.
We already spent an hour
Notre
on
Dame.
that, so
y'all want to talk about it again? Hey, and by the way, South Carolina fans, I meant to ask you guys something. I know there's some of y'all probably hanging around or watch this show today. So there's been a lot of talk in the comment section from the Tennessee fan, the old Tennessee man, saying that you guys and Connor Stallions worked together back in 2022. Is that true? Is that true, South Carolina man? Did you get the vacuum repair CEO man to Mr. Army man to go steal the signs and give them to you? Is that true? Y'all let me know in the comment section, because Tennessee man said that the only way that y'all would have beat them and Clemson would have been is if Connor Stallions gave you the signs. I'm just interested to see what you guys have to say about that. Where we I'm just going to drop that on the table, and then I'm just going to walk away.
Yeah.
Notre Dame at Purdue, that's what the one we're doing, Mason?
Yep. I've updated the lines there, so we're good.
Excuse me, guys. I'm under the weather. I'm sick today.
I'll tell
I'm
you
sick,
before
but
we get started on this one, 70% of the money is coming in on Purdue.
Whoa.
Yeah. 54% is going towards the over.
Wow. All right. Well, I want you to repeat that information here in just a second when we start this clip. Hold on just a second. Notre Dame at Purdue. Notre Dame is favored by 10. Over-under set at 45.5. This one will be played at 3:30 p.m. Notre Dame is the most recent product of the point and laugh special in college football. After an agonizing defeat at the hands of NIU, this comes just 1 week after a road victory over Texas A&M that had everybody oohing and awing at the Golden Domers. Offense was never a highlight of either one of these games for Notre Dame, as Riley Leonard has struggled to get the ball to receivers, completing just 61.3%. It's not that bad, but it's not great. Of passes for a total of 321 yards through 2 games. He has yet to throw a touchdown, and he has 79 yards rushing and 1 touchdown on the ground. Defensively, the group has looked extremely stingy. Standout secondary players Xavier Watts and Ben Morrison are lockdown cover men and will need to be avoided by Purdue at all costs if they're going to win this football game. A defensive line made up of 4 graduates, just extra veteran guys, makes for some really, really tough sledding for opposing offensive lines. Howard Cross is the anchor of that line and is really, really good at anchoring that line. Points will be hard to come by in this one for any opposing team facing Notre Dame. But scoring has been an issue for Notre Dame themselves. So a blowout seems really, really improbable here in this matchup without the defense, scoring some touchdowns or creating some turnovers for Notre Dame. Riley Leonard, to put a cherry on top of everything, now his non-throwing shoulder is injured. He had MRIs and is expected to play, but certainly should hamper his running ability and ability to lower his shoulder in this game. It's widely thought that this was a completely renovated wide receiver room for this Notre Dame unit. We know that they've only got 1 returning starter on the offensive line as well, which has made things all the more complicated. Nobody knows what the wide receivers can do at this point because Riley Leonard can't get them the football for whatever reason. I don't know if the wide receivers aren't open or if he just can't get it to them. Whatever it is, this Notre Dame offense has struggled, and that's not going to stop. And Vegas says so with their 45.5-point line here in this one. Mason, you've got some info for us on the Purdue Boilermakers. Bowler up, my friend. What do you think?
Well, do you know who leads the country in passing completion percentage? It's Hudson Card.
Who's that?
It's Hudson Card, 96% so far passing completion percentage. Yeah. So what's interesting about Purdue, and if you haven't been following Purdue football, I don't blame you in a lot of ways. They haven't played anybody. They've had one game so far, had a really peculiar bye week in week 2. So the jury is still completely out for Purdue. Right, they played Indiana State in week 1, blew them out as they should, 49-0. And Hudson Card was 24-25, which is really impressive. But most of those passes went to the tight end, Claire. He had 5 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. They did get their backup quarterback in as well. He had 10 attempts as well. So, I mean, this was a blowout game, and a game where Purdue was able to get better. They were able to get their secondary or second team players in. They had 20 players on defense record a stat. So really impressive in that sense. But what we don't know about Purdue is a lot, but in particular the injury situation. We don't know if C.J. Smith is going to go. They've got some other players that may or may not be going here in this game that could impact the game. So we've got defensive lineman Carlson's questionable. Davis, linebacker, is questionable. Another wide receiver, Brown, is questionable. I mean, we've got 8 players who are questionable or out in this game for Purdue. So couple that with the fact that we've only seen them play one game against a lesser opponent, and there's just a lot of questions when it comes to the Purdue football team. We did a deep dive of this team, and we like what they have in certain positions here, and they certainly took care of business against Indiana State. But honestly, Mark, what do we have to go off of for this team other than gut and vibes? Right, the vibes are good at Purdue, and the vibes are not very good for Notre Dame. So for me right now, this is a game that I'm staying away from a betting perspective. However, the numbers right now are going towards Purdue. 70% is going towards Purdue against the spread here at +10. I kind of like it. I'm kind of leaning that way too. But if 70% of the money's coming that way, I might want to go towards Notre Dame, right? If you force me to bet on this game, I might want to lean towards Notre Dame and say that maybe they get right this week against Purdue. But I'm here to tell y'all, if you haven't studied Purdue, they're a team on the up and up. The coach Walters has come in and done a lot in the transfer portal. They've got some key players at some key positions. They've got a few. I think 3 Georgia transfers, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even more than that, and some playmakers for sure. So anxious to see what they do. Again, we don't have a ton of data to go on for the Purdue football team, but I would be staying away from this if I were you, because they might just be that good.
Give me Purdue +10. I'm riding the wave. Notre Dame, I guess I'm doing the opposite of riding a wave. I'm standing on land watching the Notre Dame ship sink, right? Or at least their college football playoff sink. Yeah. I don't know that Purdue wins this football game. They can 100% stay within 10 points of this football team. Look, you talked about what do we have to go on by Purdue. Notre Dame's defense is really good. What offense have they played? Mm-hmm. And we can play this game with a ton of different teams all around the country. You know what I'm saying? Like Georgia's defense. Well, what offense have they played? Well, we know Georgia's defense is good, guys. We know that. I know that Notre Dame's defense is good. Don't get me wrong. But they have not been tested at all. And I'd be willing to say that Purdue, depending on, injury situations and things like that, they got just as many, if not more, playmakers than Texas A&M does on their offense. So who's to say that Purdue can't bust 1 or 2? And that may be all you need here. That may be all that you need, because Notre Dame's offense just had absolute fits with NIU last week. So with all that being said, give me Purdue +10. The over-under, I think they're begging you to take the over, and I think you've got to take the under in this one. I don't – if Purdue's going to have a shot in this one, I think it's going to be a really, really low-scoring football game where they protect the football. Give me Purdue plus 10, and if I'm playing it, give me the over. Excuse me, the under. Damn it. Messed that up right at the end, Mason. Can you
I'll just
save me
take
with
out
your
the last
editing
part.
magic?
I will save it.
Yeah.
It'll
All
just
right,
be my
thank
voice
you.
going over. Give me the under. I'll try to like mimic your voice, in some way.
Mason's gonna talk over all my picks and
Yeah.
totally just make me look like an idiot. We got one more game to talk about, brother. Thank you guys for tuning in. We just lost everybody. Everybody just tuned out. But that's all right. They'll come on back. Why do you keep repeating the LSU best line bit? J.M. Jones. J.M. Jones must have just started watching what we talked about earlier. You know what I'm saying?
Best
He must
line.
be. He's talking about the offensive line. JM, let me tell you something.
Okay.
JM, I really wish that you would fast forward to live, and I wish you'd come on the show because I'm going to tell you something, guys. JM Jones is a hoot and a half. I've been seeing Mr. JM Jones in the comment section, and I believe he's an LSU fan, and he is the one that I told you. He doesn't buy into the whole "this is the best line in the country" rap. He's like, no, this line. Yeah, they don't give up sacks, but they don't do nothing other than that. Anyway, JM, thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. I'm glad to see you in here, bud. If you ever want to come on, hit us up in the comment section and come on the show. But for now, we've got to do our last pick. We ran late today. Your boy here's got to go get some work done for my other work. You ready?
I'm just checking the line. This number's actually gone down from 53.5 to 50.5.
Whoa, that's a big swing.
Yeah, spread's still the same at 15.5 though. 55% going towards Wisconsin, 60% going towards the under.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Alabama at Wisconsin. Alabama is a 15.5-point favorite, over under set at 50.5. We had to update the numbers right before we started this because the numbers are just a moving, and it was the total that's moving down. So I guess some money coming in on the under on this one. Alabama struggled to put away South Florida last week, but they rallied late to make things look more decisive. The offensive line was an obvious point of frustration as head coach Kalen DeBoer looked on and discussed multiple times looking at the screen. There was several holds that had happened for this offensive line at the worst possible time, big plays, bringing big plays back. And it was an obvious point of frustration. Caden Proctor, starting left tackle. Everybody remembers him from the transfer portal story from this past year going back and forth to Iowa. He stays out of this one with a bum shoulder, and it just totally set off a positional musical chairs for this offensive line and caused a ton of confusion. And that's when the onslaught of holding penalties really, really got going whenever you started mixing some of these guys up. And it, as I said, negated several long plays. Jalen Milroe, Jam Miller, Justice Haynes will look to run the football first and foremost. Kalen DeBoer has showed me something so far at Alabama. He's not looking to put a square peg in a round hole. He's going to let runners be runners, and that's what the identity of this offense looks to be. You've got some really, really talented ones for sure. The questions for Bama surrounding this game are whether or not Wisconsin can stop the run and get Bama in obvious passing downs. While freshman newcomer Ryan Williams has lived up to expectations, the 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school, that's Ryan Williams. The offense really still seems to be looking for their go-to pass catcher in this one, right? So who's going to do that? There's not a clear number one guy. First and second down success and a turnover-free game should lead to a win here and a cover for Alabama, in my opinion. Defensively, the linebacker core, their potential and talent is through the roof for Alabama, but they play in front of a really young secondary group. We know Wisconsin likes to run that air raid. They haven't been extremely successful with the chunk plays that you would need to be able to beat this Alabama defense, but more on the Wisconsin Badgers. Mason, what do you got?
Well, Wisconsin ain't played nobody, Mark. When you look at who they faced, South Dakota last week, they won 27-13. And against the spread, so they were 18.5-point favorites, so did not cover against the spread. The week prior to that, they faced Western Michigan. They were 24-point favorites there and won 28-14. So this is an offense that's sputtering pretty heavily right now under Luke Fickell. Not the same offenses that he had with Cincinnati, that's for sure. Excuse me. So Wisconsin's offense, very vanilla, very average, 69th in the country in total yards at 386.5. Against those opponents, that's really bad, right? Now, I've heard, I've seen online some Wisconsin fans that are just ready to throw this freaking team under a bus. Like they are ready to just throw them in a dumpster, set them on fire. Not a lot of hope coming from this Wisconsin team for this game against Alabama. Even as bad as Alabama looked against South Florida, they're saying, guys, we have no chance. Like, this team is awful. When you look at how they've played, I get it. I see why they're saying that. Overall, their rushing yards so far, 183.5. That's good for 46 in the country on offense, that is. Again, against the weaker opponents, that number's got to tick up, especially if this is a run-first team. With Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback, who has been up and down throughout his career, you got to be able to rely on the run game if you want to have a pulse on offense. They have not been able to do so so far this season. And then on the other side of the football, defensively, they're better as a whole. But when you look at who they've faced, again, they're not playing good ball. They're 28th in total yards at 249 given up. In rushing yards, they've given up 121.5. That's 60th in the country. In yards per rush, they're giving up 4 yards per rush against Western Michigan and South Dakota. Not South Dakota State, just South Dakota. It's been really bad. I fear for Wisconsin. I fear for the Badgers this week. I think that Alabama is going to be ready to roll, pun intended. I think that Alabama is. Mark, you're messing me up, man.
I'm sorry, dude. That was funny, dude. Because I'm just envisioning now. I'm with you 100%, brother. Look, this is a 17-point victory for Alabama, in my opinion. What's your final prediction on this?
All right, I'll have to edit that out, but yeah. So overall, Wisconsin is in for it. I mean, realistically, I'm thinking that Alabama, as explosive as they've been, one of the most explosive teams in the country on offense already this year. When they hit, right? We saw them sputter against South Florida. I know the struggles that they had on a down-by-down basis. But whenever...
I love this. Oh, man. We should start a Camity podcast.
How is this the first time that this has happened? That's what I want to know.
I don't know.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my
Holy
God.
Cow.
I do. I also feel bad for Wisconsin this weekend. I really, really do. Look, I watched the Western Michigan game, and I watched it because I was like, man, I can't wait to see these new Badgers. And it was not good.
You must have been one of 3 people watching that game, I swear.
I was so excited to start the year. I would have watched anything.
Yeah.
But look, Phil Longo is the offensive coordinator. Wisconsin has decided to adopt this air raid system, and it's gonna be a bumpy ride, dude. It's gonna be really, really bumpy. And they threw the ball more times last year than they ever have before. And Tyler Van Dyke is not going to be able to do this. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we saw him against Western Michigan. He couldn't make the throws. He couldn't make the throws. Give me Alabama, give me the cover, and let's end this video. Oh,
it's
my
so
goodness.
funny to me because I'm supposed to be the one that covers for Wisconsin, and I'm like, guys, you're not winning this game. Like you're not winning this game. You're not even going to cover. I got Alabama by like 30, honestly. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's going to be a get right week.
Editing that one for sure. Just got a little case of the giggles there for no reason at all. That was.
And funny. I'm coughing and laughing. I'm laughing and coughing because I'm sick. All of a sudden, I got a cold today. So, look, guys. Hey, I think that's probably about it. We're tired and we're just giggling. So we're giggly. We got to get off. Thank you guys so much for tuning in the First and Long College Football Show. It's been a freaking blast. It always is a freaking blast, and that's why we wanted to do this. If this wasn't fun as hell, we wouldn't do it because, it's not like we're making a bunch of money doing it or something. So without you guys tuning in, there would be no point. We certainly do appreciate it. We're going to have our betting show on Thursday, which is going to be moving to Tuesdays next week. So the schedule is going to change a little bit. So Sunday, Tuesday, Saturday night. That's our live schedule. Mark it down, hit the subscribe button, come and hang out with us. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you all next time. Hey, and let's watch this little intro video one more time on the way out because I don't know, why not? It's fun, right? Let's I thought it was pretty cool. Y'all have a good night.
Hungry as hell to get started and have been waiting on this night for a while now to have you guys back. This group, we are better as a team.
What you do, your take, your reputation, the way you carry yourself on a daily basis will be evident because there will be a day that will bring it to light. When the bright lights are on, when the heat is on, when the pressure is there, when the moment is there, it will be revealed with fire. And the fire will prove the quality of each man's work. No one can save us once they didn't play.